"You're just a janitor. You don't belong at my wedding." Those words didn't come from a stranger. They came from the very boy I raised. The child I fed when he was sick. The teenager I supported through every school exam. The man I bought a house for. With every last penny I had. And yet, on the most important day of his life, he made sure I was nowhere near the celebration. "Hi, my name is Amanda. I'm 63 years old. I've spent the last 30 years of my life working as a janitor. Not because I had no dreams, but because I had someone more important than dreams. My son, Jeff. This is the story of how I gave him everything, only to be replaced by the woman who abandoned him, used for my savings, and discarded when I was no longer useful. But it's also the story of how I stood back up, how I found my worth, and how I turned heartbreak into the most powerful chapter of my life." I still remember the first time I saw Jeff. He was 5 years old, standing in the rain outside an orphanage. His tiny fingers clutching the hem of my coat, as if he had already chosen me. Back then I didn't have much. Just a job cleaning classrooms at the local school, and a rented room with peeling walls. But I had enough love in my heart to raise a child, and so I did. I worked 3 shifts to make sure he had warm food, said no to new clothes for myself so he could have books, missed doctor appointments, skipped holidays, all to save up for his future. People laughed when I said I wanted to buy him a house. "You're just a janitor," they said. But I didn't care. Because love doesn't come with a paycheck. Comes with sacrifice. And now, after 3 decades of giving, all I wanted was to see him walk down the aisle, smile at me from the altar, and maybe, just maybe, say, "Thank you, Mom." But instead I heard something else. Words that would shatter every quiet dream I had held on to. And that was only the beginning. People often say that a mother's love is quiet. Not because it's small, but because it doesn't need applause. For 30 years I lived that quiet kind of love. My name is Amanda, and I raised my son Jeff on my own. Not as a doctor, not as a teacher, not even as a shop owner, but as a janitor. I cleaned schools during the day, restaurants at night, and on weekends. I took whatever jobs came my way. Sometimes it was wiping down hospital floors. Sometimes it was scrubbing bathrooms that no one else dared touch. People saw me pushing that cleaning cart and assumed I had failed in life. But they didn't see the little boy I had waiting at home, with second-hand shoes but a brand new lunchbox, a borrowed backpack but all his school books paid in full. There was one winter I'll never forget. Our heater broke during a snowstorm, and Jeff was shivering under 3 layers of blankets. That same night, I took an overnight cleaning shift at a factory, just to afford a new heating coil. I didn't sleep for 36 hours. But seeing him warm again was all the reward I needed. I didn't go on vacations. I didn't buy new clothes. I didn't even replace the broken handle on my purse for 10 years. Because every dollar I saved, every minute I worked, was for him. People said, "You're just a janitor. How much difference can you make in a child's life?" But let me tell you something. Being a mother isn't about having the fanciest job. It's about showing up every single day, even when your feet hurt and your heart feels tired. That's what I did. I saved every penny I could, because my dream wasn't a vacation or a luxury car. It was a home I could give to Jeff as a wedding gift. Something solid, something his future family could build on. And I did it. 30 years later, I had just enough to buy him an apartment. I thought, maybe now, after all these years, he'd look at me, not as the janitor people whispered about, but as the mother who gave everything she had. But dreams don't always unfold the way we hope. Because just when I thought I was about to witness the proudest moment of my life, everything I believed about my son began to fall apart. I never thought a hospital bed would become the place where my heart would break the most. It was just a minor infection in my leg. Something the doctors said could be treated in a few days. But life has a strange way of revealing the truth. Not always in grand moments, but in the quietest corners. I was resting in my hospital room, drifting in and out of sleep, when I heard voices just outside the door. One of them was Jeff. First I smiled. I thought maybe he was checking in on me, telling the doctor to make sure I got the best care. But then I heard it. She's old. There's no point spending money on expensive surgery. Just treat her simply. And then, don't worry, I've already made sure my birth mother will attend the wedding. She looks dignified. Amanda would only embarrass me. I felt something sharp pierce deeper than any infection ever could. It wasn't the pain in my leg that made me weak. It was the realization that the boy I raised no longer saw me as his mother. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frustrated. He was cold, calculated, as if I were an item to be managed, a loose end to be tied up before the big day. That hurt in a way I cannot describe. I had always assumed Jeff was just shy about showing affection. That maybe he didn't say thank you much because life had made him reserved. But now I realized it wasn't shyness. It was shame. Shame that his mother scrubbed floors for a living. Shame that I didn't fit the image of what he wanted the world to see. I remembered how many times he had introduced me to people as just Amanda. Never my mom. Not even once. And the saddest part, I had excused it every single time. We all want to believe the best about those we love. But sometimes, love blinds us to the truth that's been right in front of us all along. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling of that hospital room, trying to understand when it all changed, trying to figure out what I had done wrong. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized. This wasn't about what I had done. This was about what Jeff had chosen to become. And that choice would become even clearer very soon. Because what I overheard next wasn't just heartbreaking. It was unforgivable. There's a special kind of heartbreak that only mothers understand. Not when your child leaves you behind, but when they choose someone else in your place. Lying in that hospital bed, still pretending to be asleep, I listened as Jeff told his fiancée Mandy, "Carrie looks elegant, head to toe in designer. She's everything Mandy's parents will respect." Carrie, his birth mother, the woman who left him at the doorstep of an orphanage when he was barely 5. The same woman who once told me, "I can't raise a child. Don't ever come looking for me again." But now she was back, and I was being replaced. Jeff hadn't just invited her. He had rewritten the story. Suddenly, I wasn't the woman who raised him, but the one who got in the way. An inconvenience, an embarrassment, a placeholder, until the real mother came along. And the irony, I had once found Carrie, years ago, back when Jeff was turning 18 and had questions about where he came from. She wanted nothing to do with him. She didn't ask how he was doing, didn't want a photo, didn't even remember his birthday. Back then I chose not to tell Jeff. I didn't want to crush his heart, so I told him maybe she was looking for him too. And that someday they might meet again. I thought I was protecting him. But maybe, in doing so, I opened the door for this very moment. You see, people often assume that the one who gave birth is the one who deserves the title mother. But motherhood is not just biological. It's not about bloodlines. It's about choosing someone every day. Feeding them, protecting them, loving them when it's hard, being there when no one else is. I chose Jeff every single day for 30 years. And yet, in a single afternoon, he chose someone else. It wasn't just about a seat at the wedding. It was about identity, about value, about the invisible scars you get when the child you loved becomes someone you no longer recognize. I stared at the ceiling that night and whispered to myself, "You've done your part. And now it's time to let go." But as I would soon find out, letting go wasn't enough. Because Jeff wasn't finished using me yet. I used to believe that love, real love, couldn't be measured, that it was something you gave without keeping score. But that belief began to crack when I realized my love had been turned into numbers on a bank statement. A few days after overhearing Jeff's conversation about his birth mother, he came into my hospital room with a forced smile and a soft voice. "Mom, I know you've been saving for my wedding. When do you plan to give it to me?" Not "How are you feeling?" Not "I'm so glad you're awake." Not even a "thank you for everything I had done." Just that question about the money I had saved for 30 years. Pennies, dollars, overtime shifts, all tucked away for a down payment on a home, a new car, a fresh start for Jeff's future. Not once did I imagine those savings would become a bargaining chip. You see, love for me had always been about presents. Packing his lunch even when I hadn't eaten. Attending school plays in my janitor uniform because I didn't have time to change. But for Jeff, somewhere along the way, love became provision. Transaction. You give me money, I tolerate your presence. You give me more, I pretend you matter. That wasn't love. That was a negotiation. And I wasn't willing to play that game anymore. But Jeff didn't see it that way. When I didn't hand over the money immediately, he began to grow impatient, offered to bring me to his wedding rehearsal in a wheelchair, but insisted I stay away from the guests, because the smell of medication might bother them. I didn't say a word, but inside I felt something shift. It wasn't just my heart breaking anymore. It was my eyes opening. How many other parents, I wondered, had been reduced to nothing more than a bank account with a name? How many of us thought we were giving love, but were actually being used, quietly, skillfully, without thanks? I thought of my neighbor Gloria, who emptied her retirement fund to help her son open a business, only for him to stop calling after the loan came through. Or Linda, who raised her niece like her own, until she was told not to attend the wedding because her dress wasn't designer enough. We give thinking it's love. They take thinking it's owed. The lesson: love should never be a transaction. And when it becomes one, it's time to step back and reclaim your worth. I didn't hand Jeff the money that day. Instead, I asked my best friend Heidi to help me find the best orthopedic surgeon in the city. Because for the first time in decades, I was going to spend my money on me. But little did Jeff know, I had one final surprise left. Not revenge, not cruelty, just truth. And sometimes, that's all it takes to shake someone's perfect little world. It's one thing to feel forgotten. It's another to realize you were never truly seen at all. The night before Jeff's wedding rehearsal, I overheard a conversation that cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. I had just finished messaging Heidi about the surgery when Jeff walked into my room. He thought I was asleep. He gently wiped my face with a cloth, the way I used to do for him when he had a fever as a child. And then, casually, he started talking to Mandy. "Don't worry," he said. "My mom loves me too much. She'll give me all her money sooner or later. Once I get it, I'll buy you that car you wanted." And then came the part that truly broke me. After the wedding, she won't be able to move much anyway. Her leg will be useless without surgery. But that's fine. She'll be quiet. She won't cause any drama. In that moment I realized, this wasn't just neglect. This was a plan. Jeff had intentionally delayed my treatment. He had used my trust, my condition, my silence against me. He wasn't waiting for me to heal. He was counting on me to not. I felt like the ground had given way beneath me. This was the same boy I'd rescued from the rain outside the orphanage. The child I had fed before feeding myself. The young man I still gave money to every month, even when my hands were too sore to open a jar. And now, I was nothing but a financial inconvenience. I remembered a moment when he was 7 years old. He had scraped his knee playing at the park. He didn't want a bandage. He just wanted me to kiss it and say, "It's okay, baby. I've got you." And I did. Every time. But now the person I'd protected was the one doing the hurting. It would have been easy to fall into despair. To lie in that hospital bed and let the infection spread. To let my story end with quiet heartbreak. But something inside me stirred. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was 30 years of buried strength. Or maybe it was the realization that I was worth more than how he treated me. You see, life will break you. People will disappoint you. But you always get to choose what happens next. You can stay broken, or you can rebuild. That night I didn't cry. I made a plan. Because I wasn't just a wounded woman in a hospital bed. I was Amanda, a mother, fighter. And no amount of betrayal was going to steal that from me. And soon, Jeff would learn exactly what happens when you underestimate the strength of a woman you once called Mom. Now might be a good time to pause and reflect. Have you ever felt betrayed by someone you loved deeply? So leave your thoughts in the comments. Let's support one another. Before we continue, I'd love to hear from you. What would you do if someone you raised for 30 years, someone you gave your whole heart to, turned around and treated you like a stranger? Have you ever felt unappreciated by someone you loved deeply? Please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might comfort someone else watching this right now, or remind them that they're not alone. Let's keep this space kind, supportive, and full of heart. Weddings are supposed to be joyful, celebration of love, a new beginning. But for me, Jeff's wedding wasn't a beginning. It was an ending, of illusions, of silence, and of the version of motherhood that had kept me small for far too long. The day of the wedding, I dressed carefully, not to impress anyone but to feel like myself again. I wore a soft yellow dress, the color of light. Not expensive but elegant in its own way. I tied my hair back, brushed a little powder on my cheeks, and looked in the mirror for the first time in years. Really looked. I didn't see a janitor. I didn't see a woman who had been pushed aside. I saw someone who had survived. Someone who was ready to stand tall, even if it meant standing alone. When I arrived at the venue, no one recognized me. Gone was the hospital gown, the wheelchair, the smell of antiseptic. I sat in the very back, behind the flowers and fairy lights, watching the guests toast and laugh, all of them unaware of what had happened behind the scenes. Carrie, his birth mother, was seated in the front row, draped in designer fabric, nodding gracefully like she had actually raised the man standing at the altar. Jeff, he looked proud, confident, maybe even relieved. He thought I was still in the hospital, still too weak to move, still too blind to see. But he was wrong. When the officiant asked if anyone had something to say before the ceremony began, I stood up, slowly, clearly, with purpose, and I said, "Before this wedding continues, I'd like to offer the groom the gift he's been waiting for, but not in the form he expects." All eyes turned, some confused, some curious, and Jeff frozen. I walked to the front and handed him a small, worn suitcase, the same one I had used to carry all my savings. But this time it was filled not with money, but with the receipts, photos, the proof of everything I had done for him: school tuition, medical bills, notes from teachers, drawings he'd made for me as a child. "You asked for my money," I said, "but forgot the value of my love. So here, take it. Take all the proof of the life I gave you." Gasps filled the room. A few guests stood up. Carrie's smile faded. And then, on the big screen behind them, a video began to play. A recording from 12 years ago. Carrie's voice, cold and dismissive. "I don't want him. Don't look for me again. That child is your problem now." Silence. Turned to Jeff, his face pale, his hands shaking. "You didn't want me at your wedding," I said. "And now I don't want to be part of your future." That moment wasn't revenge. It was clarity. You see, when someone devalues your love, you don't beg them to see your worth. You remind yourself of it. The lesson: you can give someone your time, your energy, your heart, but you should never give them the power to erase you. That day, I didn't lose a son. I reclaimed myself. And as I stepped away from the altar, I felt lighter than I had in years. But this wasn't the end, because what came next was the beginning of my new life. After the truth came out at the wedding, I walked away, not to hurt Jeff, but to finally stop hurting myself. And as I stepped into a new chapter, Jeff's world began to slowly fall apart. It didn't happen all at once. At first, he tried to hold it all together, assuring the guests that it was just a misunderstanding, pretending nothing had changed. But people talk, and when the curtain falls, what's left behind speaks louder than any performance. Within a week, Mandy called off the engagement, not because of the video alone, but because she realized that without my money, Jeff had very little to offer. I heard, through a mutual friend, that she packed her bags that same night, leaving a note that read, "You lied about who you are. You lied about who she is. I can't build a life on deception." Meanwhile, Carrie disappeared too. Her wealthy partner, whose money she had lived off for years, had seen the video, and just like that, the designer clothes, the luxury apartment, the chauffeured lifestyle, all gone. She tried to reach Jeff, but he couldn't help her, and she wouldn't help him. They were never truly family, just two people playing a part in the same illusion. Jeff tried to contact me, of course, first with apologies, then with guilt, then with blame. "If you hadn't embarrassed me, none of this would have happened. You ruined my life." But deep down he knew. His life hadn't been ruined by me, had been built on sand. And when the tide came in, there was nothing left to stand on. I never responded to his messages, not out of bitterness, but because some wounds need silence to heal, and I was done explaining my worth. He tried to rebuild, but doors began to close. People who once smiled at him now looked away. Employers heard whispers. Friends grew distant. Even the apartment I had bought him. He lost it, unable to keep up with the bills. One day, I heard he had moved back into a rented room near the very orphanage I found him in. Life, in its own poetic way, had brought him full circle. And the lesson: when you treat love like currency, you may find yourself bankrupt in more ways than one. You can wear the finest suits, host the most glamorous weddings, but if your heart isn't honest, eventually the truth will find its way out. Jeff's downfall wasn't just about losing money, it was about losing character. And when character goes, everything else follows. But while Jeff's story was unraveling, mine was only just beginning. Because when I stopped living for someone else, I finally learned how to live for me. For 30 years my life had one name, one purpose, one direction: Jeff. But after the wedding, after the truth, I stepped into something I had long forgotten: my own life. First, it was strange. There were no more bills for someone else. No more weekend jobs. No more worrying if my son had eaten or if he needed another loan. The silence felt unfamiliar, but slowly it became peaceful. Heidi, my best friend, booked us a trip to a quiet coastal town, the first real vacation of my life. We stayed by the water, drank tea in the mornings, and watched the sun rise without rushing anywhere. One morning I picked up a paintbrush, something I hadn't touched since I was a teenager. I didn't know what I was painting, just let the colors flow. At the end of the day, there it was, a sunflower standing tall, bright and open, just like the woman I was learning to become again. I started journaling, volunteering, planting a small garden outside my apartment. I visited the nursing home down the street and painted with the residents every Thursday. I laughed more, cried less, and most importantly, I stopped apologizing for taking up space. One afternoon, at a charity event, I shared my story, briefly, gently, about what it meant to be a mother, and what it meant to let go. Afterwards, a little girl no older than 6 walked up to me, tugged at my sleeve, and asked, "Can I sit next to you?" She had the same eyes Jeff once had when he first reached for me at the orphanage. I smiled, opened my arms, and said, "Of course you can, sweetheart." That day I made a decision to use my savings, not to chase approval, but to create a fund for single mothers and children without support, to make sure no woman felt worthless, and no child felt unwanted. And do you know something? For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was trying to be enough. I was enough, just as I was, without titles, without validation, without anyone else's approval. The lesson: sometimes the people we pour everything into aren't meant to carry our legacy, and that's okay. Because healing doesn't always come from holding on. It often begins the moment we let go. And as the sun set on that chapter of my life, a new one rose, bright, wide, and completely mine. They say time reveals all things. And for Jeff, it revealed the truth far too late. Months passed after the wedding. I hadn't heard from him. Not directly, at least. But I heard whispers. That he had lost the apartment. That his job had fallen through. That Mandy had cut ties completely. And Carrie had vanished as quickly as she came. Then one day, a letter arrived in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. The handwriting was shaky, like someone unsure if they had the right to write at all. It was from Jeff. Mom, I don't know what to call you anymore. But I know what you've always been. My mother. The only one who stayed. He went on to say how sorry he was. How he had been blind, foolish, proud. That chasing status had cost him the only person who ever truly loved him. I found the old bank book, he wrote. All those years you paid for my meals, my shoes, my life. I saw the entries. I saw the dates. I saw the love. He ended with, I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I wanted you to know. I finally understand. I closed the letter slowly. There was no anger in my heart anymore. Only quiet understanding. You see, forgiveness isn't always about making things right with someone else. Sometimes it's about freeing yourself. From resentment. From hurt. From the need to be seen by those who refuse to look. I didn't write back. Not because I hated him. But because I had found peace. Closure doesn't always come with a reunion. Sometimes, it's simply choosing not to reopen a door that once led to pain. And Jeff. He would carry that lesson with him. Not out of punishment, but as a mirror. A reminder of what he lost. And what he might one day try to become again. But as for me, I had no more to prove. No more love to beg for. No more apologies to wait on. I was free. And sometimes that's the most powerful ending of all. Years had passed since the wedding. Since the letter. Since I let go. And one bright spring afternoon, I stood in the community center, holding a microphone with hands that had once held a mop, a lunchbox, a crying child. Now, those hands held a truth I had earned the right to speak. I was there for a fundraiser, not for myself, but for the foundation I had started. A fund that offered support to single mothers, struggling caregivers, and abandoned children. I looked out at the audience. Faces young and old. Some were smiling. Some were quietly listening. And some were crying. I took a deep breath and said, people often ask me, what does it mean to be a mother? Is it biology? Is it sacrifice? Is it staying even when you're broken? Asterisk. And here's what I've learned. Being a mother isn't about giving birth. It's about giving love. Again and again. Even when it's not returned. Even when it's rejected. Even when it breaks your heart. But it's also about knowing when to stop pouring into someone else's cup, so you can finally fill your own. I glanced toward the back of the room. There, sitting quietly, was a young girl no older than 8. She had soft curls and eyes filled with questions. After the event, she came up to me and tugged at my sleeve. Can I sit with you for a while? She asked. And just like that, I was back at that orphanage. When Jeff first grabbed my coat. When I said yes to a child I didn't know, but already loved. I smiled, opened my arms, and said, of course you can, sweetheart. I've been saving a seat for you. That moment wasn't just symbolic. It was healing. It was full circle. Because motherhood, I realized, isn't just something you give to one person. It's a force. Legacy. A light that can shine into many lives, if only you choose to keep it burning. The lesson. You may lose the people you gave everything to, but you will never lose the value of what you gave. Love never goes to waste. Transforms. Grows. It returns. Often in the most unexpected ways. And me. I'm no longer just a mother. I'm a woman who chose to live fully, love wisely, and lead with a heart that finally belonged me. Thank you so much for listening to Amanda's story. It wasn't just a story of heartbreak. It was a story of rediscovery, healing, and strength. Now I'd love to hear from you. What does being a mother mean to you? Or, have you ever had to find yourself again after being hurt by someone you loved deeply? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might give someone else the strength to keep going. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to hear more true, powerful journeys like this one. Until next time, take care of your heart, and never forget, you are worthy of love, even if it has to start with your own. Thank you so much for staying with me through Amanda's story. It wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was a story about rediscovering your worth, about healing, standing tall, and learning that sometimes walking away is the bravest kind of love. If there's one lesson we can take from Amanda, it's this: you're never too old to start living for yourself. And no amount of sacrifice should ever cost you your dignity. Now I'd love to hear from you. What did this story make you feel? Have you ever had to let go of someone you loved for your own peace? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. I read every word, and so do others. Your voice matters here. And if you found this story meaningful, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to hear more true, powerful stories like this one. Until next time, take care of your heart, and never forget your worth.